And what happens is those tapes just play over and over and over again. That's the voice we hear in our head. But also a really big thing with the subconscious is that motherboard is what triggers our brain waves to the actions we take and we don't take. So if we have patterns and paradigms and belief systems in there that's working against what we desire, we'll never get there. And once I understood that, within a couple months, I had started up my mother corporation, which is IFGT Coaching and Consulting. And the IFGT stands for It's Frickin' Go Time. And even when I say about balance, I'll tell you, Alan, I don't talk about this a lot, but when I was in my mid-20s, I was married at the time, and we had 2 pregnancies back to back, and the babies were born at like 24, 25 weeks, and they put them on all this equipment, and they'd live for hours, and they, and then they would pass away. And then we had a 3rd pregnancy, and my son was born in 96. And then we experienced 2 more pregnancies like the first 2. And so when I say my son is the most precious thing in my life, that's where I'm coming from with that.
What does it mean to be unstoppable? Well, it probably means that you have a superpower or 2, maybe even more. The thing is that even when we are not aware of our superpower, we are still like that young Clark Kent, discovering it and being in awe of it once we find out what it truly is. Being able to harness our superpower takes us training and guidance, and the kind of guidance that comes from a wise mentor who has walked the path before us. And today, gentlemen, that's exactly who's joining us. But before we get into all that, I just want to remind you that if you want to raise your standards as a father and a husband, an entrepreneur, and I encourage you to start your hero's quest. In this program, you're going to accomplish more, develop more, and become more you have all in your life. You can get more information about this at the Awakened Man Training Academy at members.theawakenedman.net. And with that, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life. Many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
Welcome, everyone, to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I'm the founder of the Awakened Man movement and your host, Alan Dumonceau. Before we get started, allow me to ask you a couple of questions. What is one superpower that would truly make you unstoppable? You're not sure what your superpower is? That's okay, because everyone has one. And many of us may not even realize what it is and just how close we are to actually exercising it every day. Thankfully, my guest today is an expert at helping men find and ignite their superpower so that they can achieve even greater results. Allow me to introduce my guest, Joey Drolshagen. I think I said that right, Drolshagen?
Perfect.
Right on. Has been featured on Fox, CBS, NBC, along with being named as one of the top business coaches in America for 2 consecutive years. And aside from a very successful 28-year professional career as a VP in sales, Joey has also spent the last 3 decades studying, implementing, and developing what's known as the SMT method, the subconscious mindset training. Man, I can't wait to get into that, which has repeatedly allowed hundreds of people to create the life that they desire through retraining their subconscious mind to become unstoppable. Welcome to the show, Joey. How are things today, my friend?
It's great, Alan. Like I was telling you a minute ago, I'm really excited for our conversation here. It's good to meet with you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really looking forward. We have a beautiful spring day here today, and we're going to have some fun with the podcast. But, as I was saying in my intro there, at our work here at the Awakened Man, we always talk about all of us being on our own little hero's quest. It's our hero's journey. And so the first question I like to ask my guests is to tell us about a time in your life, when you knew things had to change. What did you do about it? And how did that experience shape you into the man you are today and the work that you're doing?
Absolutely, Alan. And it really was started in my childhood. I grew up in a very low income, blue collar family in Detroit, Michigan. There were 5 of us kids in the family. And I watched my mom and dad struggle financially, working massive hours, beating themselves up, the toll it took on relationships and everything else. and what we missed out on with them as a result of that, all for that financial trying to make it ends meet, so to speak. I remember at 9 years old, I went to a friend of mine's house and spent the night, and it was a totally different energy in the house. His dad gave us $20 to go up to Dairy Queen and get ice cream. In my family, we had to save up for that. Mm-hmm. And when I went back home and got back into that energy, I was like, man, you guys are not doing something right. I am not going to live like you guys live. And then I went into my early adult life, and I started working in corporate because I was conditioned that a man gets a job and supports a family and hopefully lives long enough to enjoy some retirement. So I started moving along that route. I didn't want to, but I felt I was supposed to do that. And so I did. And I had a construction business. I was a builder at an early age. And no matter what I brought in, I struggled financially. And I followed those same patterns that I saw in my parents were within me and continued to come out, even though I didn't want it to. So at 22 years old, I began doing the works that I do today. I became a student of it because I didn't know how to break it. I didn't understand the process of it or even what the heck was going on. So I remained a student of it. So that was what that pain of realizing like I can't do anything different, even though I want to. I cannot bring different results is the pain that got me moving into this. And then once I got into it, it was almost God sent where I was supposed to be here. And I just continued to learn and grow and do different things with programs or books. And it just became my life studies as I worked full time in corporate and everything else. And then I went through that process. And in my 40s, I got to a point and I understood a lot of the mechanics. I understood things like The Secret or things like that, But back in the day when it came out, Alan, I had the video, the DVD or VHS rather. It was DVD. I had the book. I even found a workbook and I really poured into it. And for about a year and a half to 2 years, what I realize now is I was trying to positive think my way into the life that I wanted, and it didn't work. And so at some point I chucked the whole thing. And then later on, once I realized what's become the SMT method, and which is total mindset alignment, really is another way of saying it, is where I understood what was missing in that. It all works perfect. The Secret, law of attraction, all that works perfectly. But what we have to do is we have to deal with that underlying conditioning that's causing that. And I'll just tell you really quickly, here's how this works is our total mindset. We have a conscious mind. In our conscious mind, we have control over. It's what we focus on. It's the thoughts we entertain, books we read, people we hang out with, all of that's in the conscious mind. So somebody's stuck in CNN, constant negative news, they're going to create those experiences in their life. So that's all in the conscious mind, but also in our conscious mind is our knowing of what we want in life, our desires and all that's in our conscious mind. And then we have the subconscious mind, and we have no control over the subconscious mind. All it does is absorbs whatever the conscious mind is focused on. But then within that subconscious, there's what I call this motherboard of all of our programming, our experiences, our belief system, our habits, our paradigms, all of that's stored in that motherboard. And what happens is those tapes just play over and over and over again. That's the voice we hear in our head. But also a really big thing with the subconscious is that motherboard is what triggers our brain waves to the actions we take and we don't take. That's the doing part of it. So the knowing is in the conscious. The doing part of what we want is in the subconscious. So if we have patterns and paradigms and belief systems in there that's working against what we desire, we'll never get there. And once I understood that, within a couple months, I had started up my mother corporation, which is IFGT Coaching and Consulting. And the IFGT stands for It's Frickin' Go Time.
Love that.
That's really how we operate. Waiting that long to do it. And when I work with clients and do the works I do, it's like, now we want results now. We don't want to wait till somewhere down the path. It's time to quit playing small.
Yeah.
So
go ahead, buddy.
Like I said, once I figured out that subconscious component, and once I started studying and understanding how we shift it's our perceptions. And when we shift our perceptions on our beliefs, patterns, habits, all of that, all of a sudden it can start opening up the doorway where we start taking different actions, which is the only way to bring about different results.
Completely agree. Wow, what a outstanding way to start our conversation today. And I just want to go back. I've just furiously writing notes here and just tons of outstanding stuff. You know what? I just want to go back to when you talked about that going over to a friend's place. I was raised in a very similar, I'm the oldest of five, very
Okay.
similar place where we didn't have a lot of money. My dad had to work really hard. And I can remember, he worked in a potash mine. We have lots of potash and up here in Canada where I'm from. And so I can remember the times there when they were going on strike, and he had that tough choice. Do I feed my family? Do I walk the picket line? And I remember him having to make that decision and walking the line. And then, he needed to take care of family. Right. And so, and he would go and do that, and then they would have shutdown. And I was what my takeaway as I got a little bit older, he was one of those few guys that would get called back. He'd get called back to go to work, right? And so I just chalked it up because that when he was at work, he actually did work, and he showed up and he did that. But we didn't have a lot of cash, right? And as the oldest of five, I can remember I always loved playing basketball and the court sports and that. And I can remember before putting on my basketball sneakers, 7 pairs of socks. And the only reason I needed 7 pairs is because they were so thin, you could see through the bottom of it, right? And just to give some sort of support on the sole of my feet, eh? And so when you were saying that and talking about, hey, getting $20 to go to, go get some ice cream or whatever, $20 was when I just felt so bad to ask for money, because I knew that was taking away from my brothers and sister. And I think about I tell that story because I think about how you talked about the programming and that subconscious and how we carry that forward, and how those instances in our lives are really driving, what our decision making. And so as you started to become more awake in finding that and recognize that, I picked up The Secret as well. And I just found that in that as well, there were some pieces that were missing. It was almost like I was a chef earlier in my career. And, I know some colleagues, they would leave an ingredient or two out because they really didn't want somebody to have a successful, be able to recreate their masterpiece. And I always thought that was whatever, that's crazy. But it seemed like there was a missing piece. And so I really tuned into Michael Beckworth's work.
Yes.
And really started to get a handle on his work and his coming from the science of mind background. And so tell me a little bit more about, as you started to discover this and these missing ingredients, how has that, what was that moment like for you? And how did that really change the way you started to approach life?
Yeah. And you know how that works, Alan, is there's multiple events that leads up to that one big event of going, I want something different, and building that, and the core of the being of I don't want to live like this anymore. And sometimes it can be really painful. I work with people with addiction and things like that, and it can be a whole, but either way, it's, when the pain is great enough. And that's what happened through a series of events. And one of the things is I was working in corporate America, and I was traveling for work at that time. I was building sales territories and stuff around the U.S. And then I had a construction company and then a finance company that I would finance it, and all this stuff is rolling and happening. And I was just miserable. And I remember when something showed up really easy for me one day, and something inside of me said, you didn't earn that. You didn't work hard enough to get that. And that was a key indicator. At the same time, Michael Beckwith, I love him as programming. We have a very similar past as far as starting and both being involved in the Unity Church movement and all of that and everything. So I had gone to Unity just to check it out one time up in Detroit. And I sat down, and a gentleman by the name of Jack Boland, who's really good, tight with Michael as well. I heard him speak, and honestly, I don't remember what he said. But I remember it lit that fuse in me that I wanted to spend my life. My true desire was to spend my life inspiring, motivating, and leading people to live better lives. Now, at that time, I didn't know how to do it for me. You know what I mean? But it was just, it was like probably my first real vision of knowing my pathway. And so from there is when I became the student. And as I started progressing through things, going through coaching programs, reading books, studies, all of that stuff and everything, it just the passion, the more I learned, the more it grew inside of me, the desire to experience it. Like I was my guinea pig.
Yes.
From the life of the programming I had to what I have today are completely black and white. I used to have things like, I mean, I'll show my age here, but we would always hear things like when we ask for money, what do you think we are, the Rockefellers? Or money doesn't grow on trees, and I'd have all that programming. And today, Alan, my programming for finances is that there is so much available abundance in this world that every living, breathing person could have more than they could ever use, and there would still be an unlimited supply. That money literally grows on trees because it's paper. And the process of that transition there, what took me years to experience and to bring about change in, it's so awesome to get to see the clients I work with happen in weeks now.
Yeah. That's outstanding. That's outstanding. Love that. And yeah, really love the unity movement as well. And how they're, really raising people up really in the message and from the Fillmores and that. I really liked also how you talked about shifting beliefs. And that's one of the things that we do in my men's work is when they come in and get involved with us, one of the first things we put them through is the module I call is the Return of the King. And really what it is a process for them to go through where they ultimately craft a mission statement, their purpose, their reason for being. And we take them through limiting beliefs and values and reassessing the values and really understanding and then also put them through a visioning process and teach them how to be more active in their lives. And you see, like you're saying, that by the time they go through that, you start to see that change, right? Especially when they can recognize these underlying limiting beliefs that are really leading to sabotaging behaviors. And I don't know about some of the ones that we have, but what are some of the sabotaging behaviors are you finding with your clients and maybe even yourself that went, oh man, I didn't realize I was doing this. And once you did, like things just started to click.
Yeah, a lot of times I have a good story to share on that, but a lot of times it's either fear-based or it's deserving. Or it's honestly what I see so often, because I work like the way I help people is I work off of 2 points of reference. I work off of what's that pain point, what's going on right now that you want to change, and what's the depth of that, because that'll help identify what those patterns and paradigms and belief systems are. And then I help them, I have road mapping tools to help them, exactly what you said, develop a dynamic vision for what they want to experience in life. And anybody I can take through that line. But what I can't do, and what was really hard and is still hard for me, is what I do isn't necessarily for the people who need it. It's for the people who want it. And some people are so embedded into that old programming that they won't see outside of it, that they don't have an open mind to something different even being possible for them, Alan. And that makes me sad when that happens. So those are some of the things. And like, I'll tell you, a client I worked with about a year and a half ago, he was a realtor. He was when I first met him, I thought, oh my God, this guy's a genius. Like, I'm gonna need a dictionary just to talk to this guy, but as I got to know him in about a 10-minute conversation, I was like, wow, his whole life is mediocre. Like his marriage is just mediocre. He's one of these guys that is passive and things like that. He has 2 kids that he wasn't really, children that he wasn't really involved in their life. His work was barely getting by, just across the board. And so the 3rd week we worked together, it came out. When he was in the 8 years old, so what is that, the 3rd grade, 4th grade, he went to a brand new school. And when he started that year, he had to start at the principal's office. He went down there and the principal told him, man, look at your grades. Like you're in 8th grade reading, you're in college mathematics. You're like, wow, I'm glad to have you here. And gave him that to take to the teacher and go down to his classroom. So now he's late for class because he had to go to the principal's office, and he walks into class the first day of school. I think he was 5th grade. The first day of school, he walks into his classroom and hands the teacher the paper. Now all the kids are sitting there. You know how that age, walking into a already started room, how uncomfortable it is. And the teacher looks at his paper and says, oh, look at I'll just call him Johnny just for the purposes of talking here, but look at Johnny, he's in the 8th grade reading, he's in college math, he's this and that, and berated this child for a few minutes in front of the class and ended it with, I guess he should be teaching this class. And everybody laughed in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And do you know, he spent that school year at a brand new school getting bullied and picked on. And that little child made a promise to himself that he would never let people see that in him again. Alan, I met him at almost 50 years old. And he had successfully followed that promise he made to himself all those years because of that teacher. So once we identified that, I was able to help him shift those perceptions to get the lessons learned, all of the stuff out of it that we do. And over the next 2 weeks, this guy must have called me 4 or 5 times to tell me all these breakthrough things that were happening. Even at one time, his wife was talking to him, and she said, "Hey, we're gonna do this or that or whatever." And he was like, "No, I'd rather do it this way," and it kind of combative a little bit with each other. And he said she turned and looked at him and said, "That was so hot."
Outstanding.
And in the time we worked, this guy his business just started thriving. He ended up, within the time we worked together, they promoted him up to leading other people on how to turn their business around for the real estate company he was with, because he did so quickly. And those are that's such a great example for me to understand like how this process works. And the reason I say that about our perceptions, our patterns, our habits, and all that is the reality of our life is make believe.
Yeah.
Because the reality of our life is based on our perceptions. So at any time, if you don't like what you're experiencing in the results showing up in your life, all you have to do is go in and identify and shift those perceptions, and you can literally shift the reality of your life.
No kidding. You're telling that story, and man, I wish I would have bumped into you, Joy, like 10 years ago, because I had my story about that similar thing is I can remember, going back again to high school, I big into court sports. It just so happened that the school that I went to, we were, middle sized school for our province. I'm up here in Canada. Anyways, the school had never won anything ever. But our football team, the guys that I grew up with, hadn't lost a game in 2 years. So they won the provincial championships, it would be the state championships for those of you in the US. And the only game they lost was the championship game in the second year. So I'm a basketball guy. So that's my thing. I'm playing that. And our basketball team had never gotten out of our little area. Well, we made it to our provincial finals. And I can remember playing that game. Even to this day, I get goosebumps telling the story, because it was such a back and forth thing. And we ultimately, we were up, we were down, we were up, we were down. And ultimately we ended up by losing by less than half a dozen points. And I can remember carrying that with me, thinking I'm never going to be good enough to be the best. Yet, and so how that manifested in my life, and I see this with other men too, is that, I'll put in all the effort, man. I'll go to work and I'll do the stuff. But then when it's at that moment of, how am I going to cross the finish line? Whoa, I got to set back. I got to step back. Right. And it took me into my 40s to recognize that pattern that was happening, that I was allowing myself to believe this story that I couldn't be good enough to finish first.
Yes. And all of that.
And then it's just how much that really, and not that finishing first is the be all end all. My point of telling that story is when we have a true belief about who we are as men, and we can carry it to the finish line, we open up ourselves to just so much goodness in our life. And when we can allow that to happen and not sabotage that last 10 steps, you're done running the 100 meter dash, and can you just lean into the last 10 step and just push yourself through? And I think that's how many times do we do that? And that's why for our work, I really focus a lot on those self-sabotaging behaviors. What are those things that you want it, you have this desire, but there's this thing that's happening and it doesn't allow you to finish it. Go ahead. You're going to say something.
Yeah, no. That was perfect. I just got to say, like, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, so I was very close to Canada. So a lot of my friends say I say A more than you guys do. And I played hockey, which I know I'm not from Canada, but I've played hockey, I've coached hockey, things like that, all the way up to high school and such. And somebody that's got an open mind, they don't have to have the most talent to perform the best on that team. And so kind of proving that over and over with the kids I've coached, or even in some basketball, I've done some coaching and such. So that whole thing there. And what happens is any area of life that somebody's disappointed, they don't like the results they're getting, and everything else, it's going to tie back to programming.
Yeah.
It's not our situation, circumstance, or the conditions around us. It's not the people. It's not the state of the economy. It's not all this other stuff. And the proof I have for that is look at the businesses and entrepreneurs that thrive in a down market.
Mm.
And then you have other ones that are struggling even in a boom time. It all goes back to that conditioning, and there is no glass. I mean, we talk about the glass ceiling, or a lot. And whenever I'm doing a podcast on a women's thing, I'll bring this up: is there is no real glass ceiling. It's our perceptions, and the reason I know that, because where somebody says they're blocked by a glass, their glass ceiling and stuff, because it's still a man's world, and I'm not debating that either way and stuff. All I'm saying is there's women that break through that. Yeah. So how do they do that then if there's really a glass ceiling? Because it would have to apply across the board for all of us.
Yeah.
Right. So when you look at those things, when you look at those processes, it's all conditioning, and most of it is taught. When you watch, people watching the news all the time and stuff like that, and that's, I understand what's going on and stuff, but there's so much that pulls us into that, and that conditioning, and even our culture. Our culture is, and I know a lot of coaching programs that I've personally been involved with investing into and stuff, that tell me in order to succeed, you got to take massive actions, and you got to put exhaustive effort in. You got to be willing to trade areas of your life for, and everything else and stuff like that. And I didn't want this bad enough to trade off my whole life for it.
Yeah.
So part of my process, Alan, has been, I want to do this and enjoy my life. I want to do this and grow this and build this and have balance and do the things I want to do, and spend time with my son and my loved ones, and motorcycle and Jeep and fish and hang glide and do all the things I love to do and travel. I don't want to have to give up things to have this.
Yeah, go ahead, Joy.
I was just gonna say, and so many things are conditioning us that if you really want something, you got to give up all this stuff. And I'll tell you, I worked with a real estate agent down here in the South about 2 years ago. And when she came to me, her business was spiraling out of control. She was working 60 hours a week, just not even turning it around, just keeping up with all the busyness that happens at those times. And she had sold about $7.5 million in sales for the year. And she had been consistently in that phrase prior to that. So we started working together. When we met, she goes, I don't even know if I have time every week to talk with you and stuff. But hesitantly, she went into it. In the year that we worked together, her business went from 7.5 and just toppled over $23 million in sales in that year. And on top of that, Alan, it was the only year of her adult life that she took 5 weeks of vacation in that same year. So when I say that this is possible to achieve this, it is, but someone has to be open-minded to willingness to experience a new outcome in order for that to happen.
Absolutely. Getting away from we call it a fixed mind, getting away from having a fixed mindset and have a growth mindset. And then that was another, I just knew this conversation was going to be like bomb dropping after bomb dropping, right? Like we're just totally shattering all of these limiting beliefs and stuff that we carry as individuals. But I can remember, up until I met my second wife here, I met her in my really early 30s, 30, 31, I think it was. And anyways, I had never read a book up until, I think I read one book in high school, and my high school sweetheart, she wrote all my book reports and did all that. I didn't do any of that. I was just a jock. But she started giving me these, books. Hey, you might want to read this. And so I was reading Jack Canfield and a bunch of stuff. And then I started to read autobiographies. And what I found through these, guys like Henry Ford and all these really successful people, and they all talked about what you talk about. They were so focused on building their business that almost everyone that I remember reading, all were divorced, sometimes multiple times. And I said to myself, as much as I want to be successful and take care of my family, not at the cost of my family. And we can use that as a crutch. And sometimes it also ends up by being an anchor if we allow that belief that, well, then I'm not going to try too hard, right? And it's these little things, that these habits and things that we put on, and we start to unpack it, like the work that you're doing, and for that example of that real estate agent saying, I don't even know if I'm going to have time to meet with you, to then being able to reorganize and set her life up to more than triple the business, that when we take that opportunity to step back and really take a look and not be lost because of the forest, because of the trees, and take a perspective and help have someone like ourselves coach them and guide them and mentor them through that piece, life can be so much more rewarding.
And she's done better every year. She's improved above that 23 every year and stuff. And it's just, and she's one of almost 1,000 clients I've worked with over the past decade that have very similar results to that. And taking wholesale companies from making $34,000 a month within months, going to $250,000 a month and things, and not adding more horsepower or more marketing or throwing money at or salespeople or things like that. Just shifting the mindset and opening up to those, shifting the perceptions and opening up to it. And even when I say about balance, I'll tell you, Alan, I don't talk about this a lot, but when I was in my mid-20s, I was married at the time, and we had 2 pregnancies back to back, and the babies were born at like 24, 25 weeks, and they put them on all this equipment, and they'd live for hours, and they, and then they would pass away. And then we had a 3rd pregnancy, and my son was born in 96. And then we experienced 2 more pregnancies like the first 2. And so when I say my son is the most precious thing in my life, that's where I'm coming from with that. But on his first birthday, I wasn't home celebrating the miracle of his life being in mine. I was down in Indiana trying to build a sales story because I thought that's what I was supposed to be doing. And to this day, as I'm telling you that, I can feel that pain of that loss of that day in my heart. And that was when like I'm going around calling on people, stuff like that. I'm fighting tears and stuff, through the day and stuff, feeling so bad. But that programming that a man gets a job, supports a family, and hopefully lives long enough to enjoy retirement was so embedded in me, I couldn't break out of it at that time. So when I started learning how to shift those perceptions and how to bring about different results, man, it's so important to me. Somebody that's just gung-ho on building their business and they're willing to sacrifice their whole life, I wouldn't work with them unless I can get them attached to that other side. And like you said, that conditioning is so embedded, because when we look at how corporate America began, and how like the Fords and all the people who have done great works and everything, but they really did give up their whole life to get that going. And so it was conditioned in us that you have to be willing to give up everything for that. And I've proved that otherwise, and I don't want to do that. And I don't want to see anybody else do that either.
Yeah. I just don't think there's any reward great enough to sacrifice that piece, and it's so true. I'm glad that we're talking about this, because as men, we do get this idea of presiding, and protecting, and we think that, and providing, and we think that those are extremes, and they don't need to be extremes. There are times where you might need to be a little bit more extreme. And we talk also about balance. What does balance look like? Well, I was explaining to individuals this past week, balance to me is a micro and a macro view. In the micro view, there are going to be times when you're going to be unbalanced. Think of it as a teeter-totter. You have projects for work to get done. You have things, assignments that you need to get done. You're going to be spending a little bit more time on the work side than you are at home. But if you haven't spent the time before that to work with your family, have your family understand what you're going through at this point, that this is just a short time, this sprint, and that I can be back, and that when you are back, you're present, and you're not still focused on that piece, then you can bring that balance, that teeter-totter of work-life type balance more in line. But overall, the macro view of that is to keep it somewhat balanced, that you've had that perspective long-term, to keep the family unit strong, to keep friendships strong, to keep all these other things that fulfill and feed our lives. Because really, as entrepreneurs, I don't know about you, but I find there are times, there are moments where it's more draining than it is more fulfilling. It's just the nature. There's stuff that in all of our work that we don't necessarily care to do. Oh, I had to get my financial
Yeah.
stuff, got to put that together. Oh, it's tax time. I don't want to do that. It's stuff we have to do. And,
yes. And even in those, it's our perceptions with that.
Yeah.
Alan. Like for me, I'm not the every week organized guy. I throw receipts in the desk drawer here. I throw them in my console, my truck. I have a desk in my home office. And so at the end of the year, I got to collect all these receipts and start separating them out and what, where. And man, I used to procrastinate and have to do delays for my accounting to file my taxes because I just couldn't get myself to do it with procrastination and everything. And then I came up with this idea, even that. It was my perception of how hard it was that I didn't want to do. So what I started doing is I shifted my thinking to go, okay, I'm going to focus on that good feeling I get, which is really, really good. The moment I hit that send button to send everything to the accountant. And I would focus on that. And all of a sudden it was like last year was the first year I did it. But in 2022, all of a sudden it was like, I started doing it sooner, and I gave them like a month or 3 weeks or something to finish up my taxes, file them on time. This year, like February, it was like, yeah, I'm just going to start organizing them, man. And I just keep thinking of hitting that send button. So even in that, when we look at our perceptions and stuff, and that balance you talked about, it's like a dance.
Yeah.
You know, there's sometimes when I have an afternoon off and I go fishing or hiking or hang glide, whatever it is and stuff like that. And then there's other times when like my office is here, right outside my office is a studio, and I'll do filming and I'll start at 9 o'clock at night and go till 2, 3 in the morning. But here's the difference.
Yeah.
When I was in corporate America, if I had to be in the office 2 days in a row after 5 o'clock, I was beat up, dead tired, frustrated, upset, all this other stuff and everything and stuff. And then, and in here, I'll start filming, like I said, at night. I'll get done at 3 o'clock in the morning and I can't sleep. I'm so excited. When we get that alignment in place, and then we start, when we're in alignment, we do things a different way. You know, successful people don't do certain things. Successful people do things a certain way.
Yes.
And so it's getting into alignment. And then even the things we're doing, it's more energizing than draining. Not that we don't need downtime and stuff. You know, I'm traveling next week for a consulting thing, and I'll be traveling the whole week. Today and tomorrow are kind of chill days for me. When I get back, it's chill time. It's time to be with friends. It's time to go do things that balance that back out, you know? Yeah. So, and then one of the other things I want to add here, because this like flows right into it. One of the programs I've developed is called Struggle to Soar. And it's specifically for men who have experienced divorce or loss of a spouse, or, you know, somebody in their career when the corporation does what corporations do and just cuts them after so many years. And like when really, really big things, the dark night of the soul experiences show up. And I help them to take all that emotional energy tied to that and use that as fuel to launch their life beyond what they could have achieved without that event happening. So the event that causes the dark night of the soul actually becomes the gift in where they are able to achieve in their life as a result of it. And it's just like lights me up to be able to do that.
Outstanding. Love that idea, that using that as a launch pad to that next phase, that next part of our lives, right? Because we can use that as a bit of a boat anchor, right? As a thing that prevents us from moving forward. But we need at times in lives, we need these mentors. We need folks like us that can come in and give a different perspective and help us shift through lives. And, you know, you talked earlier about, you know, living lives of mediocrity. And I can remember this one mentor, he was famous for saying, you know, beware the lollipop of mediocrity, one lick and you suck forever. And it's so true, right? Like we can just stay and get stuck in that piece. And so that's, you know, that was like almost 20 years ago now that I was spending time with this individual, and it just makes so much sense, right? That we can get lulled into that mindset. Yeah. So that you've developed a program that helps people move through that is outstanding. Yeah. Just love it. So let's get into, go ahead.
Yeah, go on. Well, I was just going to say, even with that, with what you're saying there is, you know, we're either pushed by our pain, right? Which is the pain points that happen and things like that. A job, you know, they take a job away, so you have to find another one. You have to do something else, things like that and everything. We're pushed by our pain. And most of the time when we're pushed by our pain, we don't always get into the ideal next situation, right? Because we're just trying to cover for something, which again is conditioning, programming and stuff. Or we can be pulled by a vision. So I was so happy to hear that you say that you do the same thing with visions, Because once we get a vision and get that excitement into that vision, and we start seeing where it's actually possible and building that possibility, ultimately all we're doing is shifting everything to become that person that achieves that vision. That's ultimately what we're doing.
Absolutely. It's about spending the time and in spending the time and understanding. And one of the questions that I like to ask my guys is that, I want you to complete this sentence. I'm the kind of man who, and then whatever you put in after that is part of that vision, that piece, that who you're aspiring to become. Because I always say people are ready to do work with me when they're ready to take responsibility for where they are in life, right? Yes, everything you've decided is up to now for who you are. Okay. You made those decisions. That's who you are in this moment. And now the third part of that is that who you aspire to become. And that's all that visioning. I'm the kind of man who, and then finish that off. And we do that in a few different pillars.
I love that.
Of life. To
the only thing I switch a little bit in that, Alan, is that who you are, because it's not who we are, it's who we're being, who we're acting like when I work with somebody and they want to quit smoking, the first thing I'll do is have them quit associating yourself with being a smoker, and smoking is something you do.
Yes.
So when we attempt, because if it's who I am, I can't really do anything different about that. But if it's who I'm being, now there, but I love that whole thing of what you talked about. It's taking ownership, and we're not victims, and it's not a victim of situation, circumstance. It's that something inside of me caused these results. And if that's the case, and I can really understand that, then I have more drive into doing something different and experiencing a different outcome.
Absolutely. Well, and it's and we use those questioning like that because it's to bring awareness to the identity that we've created for ourselves. When we, so tell me a little bit about yourself, Joey. Boom. Normally we're going to respond to that with the work we do, and we forget about
our title.
I'm a father, right? I'm a husband, I may be active in my church community or that. And so we get so locked into these identities. And if we can shatter and break that's not really who you are. Like, who is the man? Who is that man? All of you that exists, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that piece that all of us, and embrace all of it, because we are here today flourishing because we have all of these aspects of our lives, and we can stop beating ourselves up over the parts that we don't necessarily like or the things that happened to us in the past, and really take responsibility for where we are today and move forward. Boy, our life's just changed, doesn't it?
Yeah. And we can start realizing who we actually are, not who we're being. We actually get that point, and that I have a favorite quote. One of my favorite world quotes is by Marianne Williamson. And I never say it the way she says it, Alan, but what she says is, being powerless isn't our fear. We're not afraid of being powerless. What we're really afraid of is how powerful we really are. And what I have found is, as I did this work and as I take clients through this work, they start realizing that, and they start opening that up more. And you get those holy crap moments where those breakthroughs and stuff of people realizing how powerful they really are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a beautiful thing.
It sure is. It sure is. Obviously you've done so much work on it with yourself, Joy, and, read lots of stuff, had mentors. But tell me, can you think about what was the best piece of advice that you've been given in your life?
Oh my gosh. I think it came from my mom.
Nice.
I actually tattooed it on my arm. And in short form, it's to thy own self be true. If I'm really being true to myself, then I want to continue to learn who self is, and where my actions are different than my being and my soul and all of that and everything, and start understanding them. I think that's one of the biggest ones. To thy own self be true. It's not, I used to think it was selfish when I read that in the Bible or it came up and stuff, but it's really, in understanding me, I can better help you.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. Just love that. My next question is, I want to really get into some real heart stuff here. And, fast, you've been doing this now for over a decade, but let's just, look at another decade ahead. And if you were to look back at your life, you're finally going to, look back at all the work that you've done and the lives that you've changed. And if you were to think about what that legacy would mean, what would you want your legacy to be when you finally just transition from this plane?
More so than me being remembered for the works I do, the essentials of the tools of what I do to be remembered. And one of the ways I'm doing that right now is I'm getting ready to launch it's called Life Ignited Institute as a corporation. And it's all about certifying other coaches and helping them to start coaching in this area. Because if I have 100 coaches utilizing these same tools, now I've spread that, much further than I could do by myself. I love working with, like, I've gotten the opportunity to work with multiple counselors. And so now they get these tools to bring into their areas, and just like, I would love for the SMT method and the tools embodied within that to be the legacy, to be the remembrance, and to be carried on.
Yeah. Oh, I'm positive it sure will. Of everything that we spoke about today, Joey, and maybe there was something we didn't get a chance to really touch on. If there was a takeaway you'd want our listeners to have, what would that be?
I would say that if there's an area of your life that you're not enjoying, if there's an area of your life where you feel like you're struggling, whatever it is, you don't have to live there. It doesn't have to be your process and your life, that you can experience something different. And all you have to do is click on a beginner mindset instead of everything that we know. I know. It's looking, what can you add to what you already know?
Love that. That's outstanding. Hey, buddy, I just want to say thank you so much for spending time with me today. We got an opportunity. I think we've laid some breadcrumbs for people to follow, get an opportunity to really understand the work that you're doing. But if someone wanted to really dive into and spend some more time with you, get involved with your programs, what would be the best way for them to do that?
The easiest thing to do, Alan, is like, if you've heard this and you resonate with something, and if you think it's all BS, I'm okay. I love talking about it. So you can reach out. Anybody can reach out to me at coachwithjoey.com. Coachwithjoey.com. And they can schedule a 10-minute call with me, and we can get on there, and just in 10 minutes, we'll have a brief conversation about if there's an area you're stuck in, you want some guidance into that, or the vision, or any of these areas. And then, as a result of anybody who does that, you'll walk away. I'll give you a free case study video that you can watch that'll have some of the SMT tools in it, along with the teaching of how to implement those into your life.
Boy, I just love that. I'm going to make sure I put that information in the show notes, as well as all your socials, so people can reach you and get a hold of you. I just want to say once again, Bud, what an outstanding conversation. Just loved it. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Really enjoyed this, Alan, and God bless everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.